They say a father's greatest joy is giving his daughter away to a man who will love her more than life itself. I used to believe that. I truly did. I thought the day my little girl walked down the aisle would be the proudest day of my life. For months, I planned everything. The venue, the guests, the music, the food. It all had to be perfect. I spared no expense. I put in $100,000. But it wasn't just about the money. It was my love, my time. My heart poured into every single detail. My daughter had found her dream man, and I wanted her day to be nothing short of magical. But dreams can rot overnight, and love can wear a very convincing mask. The night before the wedding, I was sitting in my study, reviewing the final guest list, just making sure everything was perfect. That's when he walked in. Her few polished shoes, a slick smile, and a tone that, even now, still makes my blood boil. He said, "There's something we need to change." I looked up, curious. He leaned closer, scanning the names on the list. And then, with a smirk that could curdle milk, he said, "We only want important people there." Important people. At first, I laughed. I honestly thought it was a joke, some nervous, pre-wedding jitters. But his expression didn't change. He wasn't joking. He started pointing 2 names on the list. My cousins, my own brother, my late wife, his best friend. Even the sweet old school teacher, who had known my daughter since she was 5. Kajit Tim, unnecessary. Then he looked me straight in the eye and said, "This is going to be a high-profile event, sir. We don't want ordinary people ruining the aesthetic." Those words hit me like a hammer. Ordinary people. He was talking about my family. The people who raised her, loved her, and carried our family through the darkest days after her mother died. The very people who made my daughter who she was. That's when I saw it. The truth hiding behind his charm. He didn't love my daughter. He loved the idea of marrying up, of showing her off like a trophy. And me. In his mind, I was just a wallet. I stayed quiet that night. I didn't argue. He just nodded, poured him a drink, and told him I'd handle it. But inside, something burned to life slow, cold, and razor. Because that man didn't just insult my family. He insulted my blood. He disrespected every ounce of love I had given, every single dollar I had spent. And he thought I would just take it, that I'd stay silent and be grateful that someone like him chose my daughter. He had no idea who he was talking to. See, he thought he was marrying a girl from a quiet family. People who would bow down to his money, his status, his arrogance. What he didn't know was that beneath my calm face, a storm was building. That night, I made a promised one that would change everything by morning. If he wanted important people at his wedding, I'd make sure he got exactly that. But by the time I was done, the only important thing left would be the lesson he would never, ever forget. Because when a man disrespects a father's love, he doesn't just lose a wedding, he loses everything. And before the sun rose again, that $100,000 dream wedding would vanish into thin air, taking his pride, his reputation, and his future right along with it. After he left my house that night, I sat there in silence for what felt like hours. The glass of whiskey in my hand had gone warm. His words echoed again and again inside my skull. We only want important people. It's strange how a single sentence can tear through years of trust. I had spent months helping that man, treating him like a son. I welcomed him into our family, shared dinners, listened to his plans for the future. I even gave him the watch my wife had given me on our 10th anniversary, a symbol of family, of legacy. And now, he had turned around and spat on everything we stood for. There are moments in life when your heart breaks, and then there are moments when it hardens instead. That night, my heart turned to stone. I remembered how he used to brag subtly about the car he drove, the clubs he attended, the hyperfoul friends he had. I'd always ignored it, telling myself he was just young, maybe a little insecure. But now I saw it clearly. It wasn't insecurity. It was pride, the poisonous kind. He didn't want to marry my daughter because he loved her. He wanted to marry her because she made him look good. She was beautiful, kind, and intelligent, everything he wasn't. She was his ticket into higher circles, his perfect accessory, and he thought I was too blind to notice. Never mistake a father's silence for weakness. Sometimes, silence is the sound of a storm gathering strength. The first call I made was at 2 a.m. to the wedding planner. I told her the wedding was off. Cancelled. She was shocked, of course. "What about the deposits?" she asked, her voice filled with panic. "What about the contracts?" "They're all non-refundable." Primera, Saeed, calmly. No, don't worry. You'll still be paid in full. Just make sure everything is shut down. No flowers, no music, no cake, nothing. The next call was to the manager of the 5-star hotel where the reception was booked. I used the same calm, unwavering voice. "The event is cancelled. Send me the final bill for the cancellation fees." $100,000. Up in smoke, but it felt like the best money I'd ever spent. Then, I started calling the guests. Not all of them, just the ones he considered important. His boss, his wealthy associates, the city councilman he was always trying to impress. I told each of them that my daughter's fiancé had decided to call off the wedding due to some unforeseen personal issues. I was vague, but my tone implied something serious, something scandalous. The rumor mill would do the rest of the work for me. My last call was the hardest. It was to my daughter. I sat on the edge of her bed, just like I did when she was a little girl with a nightmare. I told her everything. Every word he said. I watched her face crumble as the man she thought she loved was revealed for who he truly was. Her tears broke my heart, but I knew this pain was 1,000 times better than the lifetime of misery that awaited her. She deserved a man who would cherish her family, not discard them. By sunrise, it was done. The dream wedding was a ghost. His phone would be blowing up with calls from confused and angry important people. His reputation would be in tatters. He'd arrive at the church to find it empty. No bride, no guests, no future. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for love. The fierce, protective love of a father. He wanted a wedding with only important people. Well, in the end, the only important people left were my daughter and me, sitting together, ready to start over, and that's all that ever really mattered. That night, I quietly pushed open the door to my daughter's room. She was sound asleep, and next to her bed, her wedding dress hung silently, a pristine white beacon of her dreams. I just stood there for a long, long time, my gaze fixed on her. She has her mother's smile, you know, soft, trusting, and just brimming with hope. And in that moment, a single thought echoed in my mind. Asterisk. She doesn't deserve this. Asterisk. I couldn't bring myself to tell her what I'd overheard. Not yet. The truth would shatter her. She was so close to her big day, completely lost in the beautiful illusion of her perfect wedding. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I had to protect her, even if it meant breaking her heart later on. So, right there, in the quiet of her room, I started to plan. I pulled out every single invoice, every vendor contract, every name connected to this wedding. You see, the groom, he was under the impression that his wealthy family was footing the bill for everything. He paraded that fact around like a trophy. But what he didn't know, what he never bothered to check, was that every single payment, every reservation, every last deal was made under my name. The grand venue, the 5-star catering, the elaborate decorations, to live band, all of it. And that gave me one crucial thing. Absolute control. Let me tell you, revenge doesn't start with a roar of rage. It starts quietly, with a pen, a stack of contracts, and a mind that has become terrifyingly calm. By midnight, I had the event manager on the phone. "Cancel everything," I said. There was a pause on the other end. "Sir," she stammered, "the wedding is tomorrow." I didn't raise my voice. I said, "Cancel everything." My tone was steady. Too steady. Next, I called the caterer. Then the florist. 10 divans. One by one, I dismantled the dream I had paid to build. Each of them protested. Of course, they were shocked, confused, but their protests died down the moment they remembered whose name was on their checks. By 3 a.m., The magnificent $100,000 wedding was nothing more than a pile of voided contracts and unanswered phone calls. But I wasn't finished. Oh no, not even close. A man who disrespects your family, who looks down on the very people who built you up, deserves to lose more than just a party. He deserves to lose his pride. As the first light of dawn touched the sky, I was on the phone with my lawyer, an old friend who owed me a favor. I instructed him to transfer every last cent from the wedding account into a new one, opened solely in my daughter's name. That money wasn't for a fake ceremony anymore. It was for her real future. As I hung up, I poured myself another drink and simply waited for the morning to come. The city outside my window was just beginning to stir, but in Sideme something else had awoken. Something cold, precise, and completely unstoppable. His arrogant words kept replaying in my head. We don't want ordinary people at our wedding. Ordinary people. EAD. No idea. The people he sneered at. My workers, my friends, my family. They were the ones whose hard work and loyalty allowed me to afford this lavish event in the first place. He thought power came from inherited money and a fancy last name. He was about to get a very hard lesson that real power belongs to the man who actually pays the bills. At 8 a.m., I put on my best suit and drove to the venue. Just as I expected, the manager was there, pacing nervously. Erused Ober telling me the groom's family had been calling all morning. Absolutely furious. They arrived to find an empty hall. No decorations, no staff, no anything. They were demanding answers. He who smiled. Tell them to call me directly. It didn't take long. Minutes later, my phone rang. It was his father, a man whose voice just dripped with arrogance. What is the meaning of this? He boomed into the phone. I kept my own voice calm, almost. And the meaning is quite simple, I replied. You said you only wanted important people at the wedding. After some consideration, I realized none of you quite fit the description. There was dead silence on the other end, and then complete chaos. He started shouting, threatening lawsuits, threatening to go to the media. I let him vent his fury, and when he finally paused for breath, I said, "Don't worry, you'll get your exposure on Yungup. You know, sometimes the sweetest sound isn't a scream of anger. It's the stunned, impotent silence that comes right after." By noon, the whole charade came to a head. The groom and his family stormed into the empty venue. The decorations were gone. The tables had vanished. The stage was dismantled. The only people there were a few workers sweeping the floor. The groom's face went white as a sheet when he saw me standing there, in my black suit, calm as a statue. He marched right up to me, his face twisted in rage. "What did you do?" he yelled. I looked him dead in the eye. "I did exactly what you asked," Primera Said softly. "I removed all the unimportant people." His mouth fell open, but no words came out. For the very first time since I'd met him, he looked small, powerless. See, revenge doesn't always have to roar. Sometimes it just whispers, and that whisper is enough to shatter a man's entire world. He tried everything. He argued, he begged, he tried to reason. He blustered about the media being on their way, about guests flying in from all over the country. I didn't flinch. I'd already personally contacted all of Asterisk, our Asterisk real friends and family, informing them the wedding was postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. The only ones left in the dark were his high society acquaintances, all dressed up with nowhere to go, about to arrive at an empty, echoing hall. My daughter still doesn't know the full story. I couldn't tell her, not yet. First, the world had to see him for who he truly was. The fall had to be public. It had to be complete. And as I stood there, watching his fabricated world crumble around him, I knew I'd made the right choice. I protected my daughter's future, not from a broken wedding, but from a broken life. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more content. It really helps us out. We'll see you in the next one. The phone call to my friend, a local journalist, was the first domino to fall. I laid out everything, every single insult he'd hurled at my family. She promised to handle it with care, to let the story break just as the chaos peaked. The headline was already written in my mind. $100,000 wedding canceled overnight after groom insults bride's family. By the time that story hit the web, there would be no place for him to hide. That night, a profound sense of calm washed over me, something I hadn't felt in years. All the pieces were moving. The plan was flawless, and for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled. Not from happiness, but from the cold satisfaction of knowing that the man who thought he was untouchable was about to lose it all. You don't spend 25 years raising a daughter, pouring your heart and soul into her, just to let some arrogant fool humiliate her. You raise her to be strong, so that when someone tries to tear her down, she knows how to stand up for herself. But this time it was my turn to fight for her. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and sunny, a perfect day for a celebration. But this celebration was built on a foundation of lies. Outside, the world was peaceful. But inside the venue, the storm I had orchestrated was about to make landfall. Every great storm starts with a whisper, and mine began with a single, cancelled phone call to the wedding planner. By 9 a.m., the first wave of guests began to arrive. TSC, worthy important people. He was so desperate to impress his business partners. Socialites. People whose smiles were as fake as their jewelry. They stepped out of their luxury cars, expecting to be greeted by opulence and grandeur. Instead, they found an empty courtyard, bare floors, and a chilling silence. No music, no flowers, no life. Just ... nothing. From a distance, I watched as their confusion curdled into panic. The groom's mother was screeching at the coordinator, her voice echoing in the empty hall. His father was barking orders into a phone that would never connect to anyone who could help. And there he was, my would-be son-in-law, frozen in place, clutching his expensive tuxedo like a shield that could somehow protect him from the reality crashing down. When arrogance collides with reality, the sound it makes is a deafening silence. Then, he saw me. He spotted me standing across the courtyard, and I didn't flinch. He stormed over, his face a blotchy red, spitting out a jumble of words that tumbled over each other. You can't do this. People are here. The reporters. I let him exhaust his tirade, and then, in a quiet, steady voice, I said, I told you, son, only important people belong here. Looks like there aren't any. His mouth fell open, but no words came out. Around us, the first camera flashes went off. Guests were whispering, some filming on their phones, others trying to pretend they weren't witnessing a complete social implosion. In that very moment, his carefully constructed nightmare began. You see, revenge doesn't need fire and fury. It just needs witnesses. His father, still fuming, began demanding a refund, threatening lawsuits and reputational ruin. I just smiled. Everything was booked under my name. Nothing here belongs to you. Not a single thing, except for the embarrassment. That's all yours to keep. That hit him hard. You could see it in his eyes. He finally understood. Meanwhile, my daughter's side of the family had been instructed to stay away, to shield her from the chaos. I wanted her to have one last morning of peace, one more moment wrapped in the illusion that her perfect day was unfolding as planned. But the digital world had already caught fire. Photos of bewildered guests standing in a vast, empty hall spread like a contagion across social media. The caption was exactly what I'd planned. $100,000 wedding vanishes overnight. The internet never sleeps, and when it wakes up hungry, it devours reputations whole. By noon, his company put out a pathetic public statement blaming technical issues. Nobody bought it. Journalists were calling nonstop, and online influencers were having a field day, mocking his downfall. His sponsors started pulling out of collaborations. One by one, he had built his entire public image on a lie of perfection. And now that image was rotting in real time for the world to see. But I wasn't done. I then released the screenshots of his messages from the night before. The one where he called my family ordinary people. The public read those words, and the tide of opinion turned against him completely. Within where hashtags were trending, painting him not as a charming entrepreneur, but as an arrogant snob who insulted the family of the woman he was supposed to love. In the age of social media, Pride dies a much faster death than love. While his world was crumbling, I drove home to my daughter. She was in her room, getting ready, looking radiant and completely innocent of the storm raging outside. When I sat her down and told her the truth, tears welled up in her eyes. But they weren't tears for him. They were for me. "You did all this? For me?" she whispered. I just nodded. "I did it for your freedom." She looked at the beautiful wedding dress hanging on her door, a symbol of a future that was never meant to be. Then she looked back at me. "Then let's end it properly." With a newfound resolve, she twisted the engagement ring off her finger, placed it in my hand, and said, "You decide what to do with it." Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is the moment your tormentor realizes you never needed them in the first place. Together, we drove back to the venue. Just as a swarm of reporters converged on the gates, my daughter stepped out of the car beside me, her chin held high, her eyes clear and dry. Cameras flashed, and a reporter shouted, "Miss, what happened?" She offered a small, knowing smile and said, "We only wanted important people here." Turns out, he wasn't one of them. The crowd erupted. There were gasps, followed by laughter, as headlines were born right there on the pavement. I saw his face twist in a grotesque mix of rage, shame, and disbelief. He tried to push through the crowd to get to her, to explain, to salvage something, but security blocked his path. For the first time in his privileged life, he couldn't buy his way out of a problem. He was trapped in the very mess he had created. You don't have to bury your enemy with dirt. Sometimes, you just have to bury him with his own words. As we drove away, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages and calls from people applauding what I'd done. I ignored them all. True revenge isn't about getting applause. It's about finding closure. By that evening, the fallout was complete. Sponsors, investors, and his so-called friends had all cut ties. His social media accounts went dark. His father's company's stocks took a hit. Every circle he once worshipped had turned its back on him. That night, my daughter and I had a quiet dinner together at home. She was strong, her spirit unbroken. After a long silence, she looked at me and said, "You taught me something really important today, Dad. Importance isn't measured by how much wealth you have. It's measured by how much respect you show." I raised my glass to her. Exactly. And in that moment, I knew we had one. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next one, when the lesson is learned, the revenge is complete. But the story isn't over yet, because even though the world now mocked him, I wasn't finished. Public humiliation was only the beginning. There were debts, secrets, and alliances he didn't know I could touch. I had the power to erase him completely. And for what he did to my family, primer intendetto. Tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin. The next morning, peace sat heavy on my shoulders, the kind of peace that only comes after a storm. But inside, I wasn't done. Because humiliation fades with time. Destruction, however, leaves scars. When a man builds his pride on people's pain, the only fair justice is to make him choke on it. I woke up early, brewed my coffee, and opened my laptop. The headlines were everywhere. $1 million groom humiliated at empty wedding. Bride walks away from snobbish fiancé after viral text leak. Photos were plastered across every news feed, eyes swollen, hair undone, suit half torn. He looked nothing like the polished businessman he used to be. I should have felt satisfied, but I didn't. See, he had mocked my family's worth, our values, our decency. He had insulted my daughter's upbringing. This wasn't just about embarrassment. This was about making sure he never had the power to look down on anyone again. Revenge, ISNT. Complete when they fall, it's complete when they realize you the one who pushed them. I started making calls. Old friends, old favors, people who owed me loyalty from the days when I still ran my construction firm. I didn't ask for much, just information. Within hours, I had everything I needed. Turns out, his busyness, the one he bragged about endlessly, wasn't as solid as he claimed. He'd been moving funds around, making fake investments just to look richer. One call to the right auditor, and his empire began to tremble. When truth walks in, lies crumble like glass. The investigation hit within days. His accounts were frozen. Sponsors pulled out. Partners ghosted him overnight. He tried to reach out to me, called, texted, begged. I never answered. Meanwhile, my daughter had started to smile again. For the first time in months, she was free of that fake perfection he'd wrapped around her. She even began painting again, something she'd stopped doing since she met him. Watching her colors return gave me purpose. But I wasn't done. Because some lessons have to be permanent. I reached out to a journalist friend who specialized in business fraud. I gave him every document, every screenshot, every email that exposed the groom. I said double life, the offshore accounts, the fake donations, the lies. A good revenge doesn't scream. It whispers into the right ear. Within 48 hours, his name became poison. He wasn't the visionary entrepreneur anymore. He was a scammer, a liar, a fraud. The same people who toasted him last month now deleted his photos, unfollowed his accounts, and denied ever knowing him. He showed up at our gate once. Rain poured down as he shouted my name. I stepped out quietly, watching the once arrogant man now soaked, desperate, trembling. "I lost everything," he screamed. "You ruined my life." I stared at him and said, "No, son, you did that when you decided people were worth less than your pride. You can't burn bridges and expect warmth when you're cold." He fell to his knees, begging for a second chance, claiming he still loved my daughter. But I saw right through him. Love doesn't vanish with the loss of money. His did. I told him to leave before I called the police. He left without another word, and that was the last time I saw him in person. But his story didn't end there. A few months later, I learned he'd been blacklisted by investors, his name flagged in financial circles. Nobody wanted to work with him. Even his family moved abroad to escape the shame. He was left alone, no company, no fiancé, no friends. Some prisons don't have bars. They have memories. Meanwhile, my daughter had moved on. She met someone new, kind, humble, grounded. The kind of man who helped her rebuild her confidence, not destroy it. Seeing her smile without pretending, that was the closure I needed. Still, I sometimes revisited those old screenshots, the ones that started it all. The night he texted, "We only want important people." He thought he was cutting us out. He didn't know he was digging his own grave. Underestimate a father's love, and you'll meet his rage in silence. Months passed one evening. As I sat on the porch, I received a letter. No name, just an envelope with shaky handwriting. I opened it. It was from him. Inside, a single line. "You were right. Importance isn't money, it's heart." And I had none. I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and never mentioned it to my daughter. Forgiveness wasn't needed. He'd already punished himself far better than I ever could. But deep down, I knew revenge wasn't what freed me. It was watching justice unfold naturally, one consequence at a time. Sometimes karma doesn't need help. It just needs patience. As the months turned into a year, his story faded from the news, replaced by newer scandals. But among people who mattered, his name became a quiet warning. "Never forget," they'd say. "The man who called others unimportant and lost everything because of it." My daughter opened a small art studio in the same city where the chaos once happened. I helped to build it, brick by brick. Every wall in that studio whispered peace, not revenge. And on the door, she hung a small plaque that read, "For all the people they once called unimportant." The sweetest revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. That's when I finally smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since the night he sent that message. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If it resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe for more content just like this. See you in the next one. Months passed, but his downfall didn't stop there. The truth was simple. Revenge had given me satisfaction, but redemption gave me peace. And peace, unlike revenge, doesn't fade. I didn't need to follow his life anymore. Gossip has a way of traveling. Bits and pieces would float through town how he'd moved into a small apartment on the very edge of the city. How he'd started drinking heavily. No one wanted to trust him again, so finding a job was impossible. The man who once declared he only wanted important people around him now lived in a world where no one even remembered his name. It's strange, isn't it? How life can pivot on a single decision, a single sentence, rewriting your entire story. The higher you build your walls of pride, the more devastating it is when they inevitably collapse. Revenge has a way of echoing through time quiet first, then thunderous when you least expect it. Fate always finds the right audience for the show, and sometimes revenge doesn't end with a scream. It ends with a silence so deep, it haunts you forever. A year after that disastrous wedding day, my daughter decided to host her first art exhibition. Her paintings were a symphony of color, emotion, and life. They told stories of freedom, of heartbreak, and ultimately, of rebirth. The theme of the exhibition was unseen and unheard. She said it was for all the people who had been dismissed, overlooked, or made to feel unimportant. That night, the gallery was bathed in a warm, inviting glow. The space filled with guest local artists, our neighbors, close friends, and even a few influential people who genuinely cared about her work, not her connections. Watching my daughter stand there, so confident, so radiant, so unbroken, I felt a kind of pride that can't be bought. It's the kind that grows from the deepest pain and blossoms into incredible power. It's true what they say. Some flowers only bloom after they've been stepped on. Her spirit was one of them. She was thriving, not just surviving. She was building a world on her own terms, a world where her voice mattered. Then, something completely unexpected happened. In the middle of the event, I saw a familiar face lingering in the crowd near the entrance. It was him. He looked thinner, older, and his eyes were hollow. He wore a simple suit, a far cry from the expensive ones he once bragged about. For a fleeting moment, our eyes met, and in my mind, the entire room fell silent. This wasn't the same arrogant man who had shattered my daughter's heart. The entitlement, the swaggerette, was all gone. In its place stood a broken man, clutching a small, plain envelope. There is nothing more terrifying to a proud man than seeing himself reflected in the eyes of those he has hurt. He waited until the crowd started too thin, then began walking toward me, his steps slow and uncertain. I didn't move. I just watched him approach. When he finally reached me, I took a deep, shaky breath and said softly, "I came to say sorry, not for you to forgive me, but because I finally understand what I did." His voice was barely a whisper, stripped of its former authority. He handed me the envelope, then turned and walked away without another word. Inside, I found a check for $100,000, the exact amount I had spent on that ill-fated wedding. Tucked beneath it was a small, handwritten note. It read, "I stole your peace once. This won't buy it back, but maybe it can build something good again." True regret isn't spoken in grand apologies. It's paid in silent actions. It was a gesture I never anticipated, a confession without the need for an audience. I never cashed that check. Instead, I walked over to my daughter's art studio donation box, a fund she'd set up to support underprivileged young artists, and I placed the envelope inside. Because money, when it's tainted by arrogance, loses all its meaning. But when it's repurposed for kindness, it can become a tool for redemption. It was no longer his money. It was a seed for someone else's future. Weeks later, I heard he had left the country. No social media updates, no new business ventures. He had simply vanished. Some people whispered that he'd started working with a charity overseas, building homes for the poor. Maybe it was guilt driving him. Maybe it was a genuine transformation. In the end, it didn't really matter to me. Karma had already done her work, and the final chapter of that story was closed. Revenge teaches harsh lessons, but it's redemption that writes the final, peaceful line. One evening, my daughter and I were sitting in her studio, surrounded by her vibrant canvases. She looked at me thoughtfully and asked, "Dad, do you think people can really change?" I smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "People break first," I told her. "And sometimes, within those broken pieces, they finally find the shape they were meant to be all along." She nodded, a quiet understanding passing between us, something that went beyond words. Deep down, she knew I'd done what any father would do, protect her heart, even if it meant shattering someone else's illusion of power. A father's love is often quiet, but when it roars, it has the power to rebuild worlds. Years went by. Her studio became one of the most respected in the city. Her art traveled across borders. Her name appeared in prestigious magazines, and she built a beautiful life filled with the kind of genuine kindness that can only come from surviving cruelty. Every time I stepped into her gallery, my eyes would land on the same small plaque by the door, the one that had been there since her very first exhibition. For all the people they once called unimportant. Those words still make my chest tighten with a mix of pride and a faint echo of past pain. Because they weren't just her words. They were old. They were a testament to our shared journey. And in that, I found the ultimate truth. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't about destroying your enemy. It is about outgrowing them so completely that they become an insignificant footnote in your much grander story. You just build a better life. A life so full of light that their shadow can no longer touch you. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but no one ever talks about what comes after. The quiet, the calm, the strange peace that follows when the fire finally burns out. For months, I replayed his words in my head. We only want important people. They used to sting. They used to feel like a dagger twisting in my chest. But now they mean nothing. Because I'd learned something he never did. Importance isn't given by status. It's earned through love, kindness, and respect. When you know your worth, no insult can take it away. I used to think I wanted revenge, just to make him suffer. But in truth, it wasn't about pain, it was about balance, about justice, about showing that arrogance has consequences. And once that balance was restored, the anger inside me finally went quiet. My daughter often asks me about that day, the day the wedding vanished. I tell her, it was the day I remembered who we are. We weren't the kind of people who begged to be seen. We were the kind who built something worth seeing. Some losses aren't punishments. They're protection in disguise. Because if that wedding had gone through, she would have married a man who saw her as an accessory, not a partner. And maybe that was the universe's way of saying, she deserves more. Sometimes, what feels like the end is just the door to something real. Months later, I walked into her art studio. The walls were covered with color, light, and emotion. Every brushstroke told a story of survival, and on one wall, she had written a small quote. I stopped chasing importance the day I found peace. That moment. That was my closure. Not the ruined groom, not the empty wedding hall, not even the $100,000 I'd lost. It was seeing her stand tall proud, free, and unafraid. The best revenge isn't winning. It's healing. And as for him, I don't hate him anymore, because hate is just another kind of chain. He's living his life somewhere, trying to rebuild himself. And I truly hope he learned something along the way, because revenge without a lesson is just destruction. But revenge that teaches, that's justice. Justice isn't about making them hurt. It's about making them see. Looking back, I realized that every dollar I spent wasn't wasted. It bought a truth I never would have seen otherwise. It showed me the faces of real people, the ones who stayed when things fell apart, the ones who never needed to prove their importance to anyone. That's when I understood. It's never about the size of your guest list, your ring, or your name in a newspaper. It's about the love that fills the room, the hands that lift you up, and the hearts that never walk away. You can't measure importance in money, only in meaning. So yes, the $100,000 wedding vanished, but in its place, we found something priceless. Truth, respect, and peace. And if I had to choose between revenge and peace again, I'd still choose both, but in that order. Because sometimes, peace only grows after the storm. Now, when I sit on my porch at night, the same porch where I planned that wedding, I don't think about what I lost. I think about what we gained. My daughter's laughter echoes through the halls again. Her paintings hang in homes across the country, and every time she hugs me and says, "Thank you, Dad. I know. Everything happened exactly the way it was meant to." Revenge gave me justice. Forgiveness gave me freedom. So if you ever find yourself betrayed, disrespected, or made to feel small, remember this. You don't have to scream to make them listen. Just stand tall, stay silent, and let time do the talking. Because time always collects what's owed. And in the end, when the dust settles, you will realize the most important people are the ones who never made you feel less than you are. They tried to define importance. I redefined it. And that, right there, was my revenge. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I'd appreciate it if you like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Take care, and remember your worth.